Right, chapter 243, The Fight, the Ruined Gamester. The day on which the fight was to take place between the Birmingham Bruiser and the Haggerstone Pet now drew near. Great was the excitement of the sporting world on the occasion, and all those who were not in the secret of the cross felt confident that the Bruiser must win. Indeed, the odds had risen in his favor from 5-4 to 11-5. There were numerous bettors, and the takers were willing. The following paragraph appeared in Bell's Life on the Sunday preceding the contest. The approaching fight, the mill between the Birmingham Bruiser and the Haggerstone Pet, is to come off on Thursday next at Wigginton Bottom, near Snodsnook Park in Essex. We are assured by persons who have seen the Bruiser in training at Bexley Heath and the Pet at Chess Hunt that the men are in first-rate condition and full of confidence. The Bruiser has vowed that if he is beaten in this fight, he will retire altogether from the ring, but his friends do not for a moment apprehend that the result will be such as to occasion such a step. The admirers of this truly British sport have begun to flock to the neighbourhood of the scene of action, and every bet at Wigginton is already let. In fact, we know of 2 guineas having been offered and refused for a mere shakedown in the tap of the Green Lion, at that beautiful little village. The odds in favour of the Bruiser have risen within the few days to 11-5. The Bruiser's backers are not known. They are most likely some swell nobs who prefer keeping out of sight. Some thousands of pounds will change hands next Thursday. On the appointed day, Lord Dunstable drove his friends Egerton, Chichester, Harborough, and Cholmondeley down to Wigginton in his four-in-hand, an equipage that he had only very recently set up, and which had been purchased and was still maintained by the coin extracted from the pocket of the credulous son of the deceased outfitter. The scene of the contest was thronged with as miscellaneous a collection of persons as could possibly be gathered together. There were specimens of all classes, from peer down to beggar. The fashionable exquisite was jostled by the greasy butcher. The sporting tradesman was crushed between 2 sweeps. The flat was knocked down by one blackleg and picked up by another. The country squire was elbowed by the horse chaunter. The newspaper reporter was practically overwhelmed by the influence of the press. And in short, there was such a squeezing that many who had paid a guinea to be conveyed thither would have gladly given 10 to be removed away again. Presently a tremendous shout of applause welcomed the arrival of Lord Snodsnook's carriage, from which leapt the Haggerstone Pet, who was immediately surrounded by his friends, and shortly afterwards a slap-up turnout, tooled by a sporting publican of the West End to whom it belonged, brought the Birmingham Bruiser upon the scene of action, amidst renewed vociferations and other rush of supporters. The preliminaries being all settled, the combatants stripped, entered the ring, attended by their seconds, and then shook hands. The newspapers subsequently declared that no 2 pugilists ever peeled better nor seemed more competent. It is not our purpose, however, to dwell upon the disgusting exhibition. Those brutal displays are loathsome to us, and to our mind are a disgrace to the English character. Suffice it to say that the Birmingham Bruiser was quite able to beat the Haggerstone Pet if he had so chosen, but he had made his appearance there on purpose to lose. For upwards of 20 rounds, however, he secured to himself the advantage, and the general impression amongst the uninitiated was that he must win. Those who were in the secret accordingly bet heavily upon the Haggerstone Pet, and we need hardly say that, as Egerton backed the Bruiser, he found several of his dear friends perfectly willing to accept the odds at his hands. By the 25th round, the Bruiser began to grow groggy and to hit at random. Of course, this was mere pretense on his part, but it gave the Pet renewed courage, and in proportion as the latter acquired confidence, the former seemed to lose ground rapidly. Many of the backers of the Bruiser now exhibited elongating countenances, and when that champion was thrown heavily at the 31st round, his former supporters manifested a desperate inclination to hedge. Egerton, however, remained confident in favour of the Bruiser, but then he knew nothing about prize fighting. It was the first combat of the kind he had ever seen in his life, and even if he had been inclined to hedge his bets, he would have found no persons willing at this stage of the proceeding to afford him the chance. The Bruiser played his game so well that even the most experienced in the pugilistic science were unable to detect the fraud that was being practised upon them, and thousands were deceived into a belief that he was really doing his best to win. At the 40th round he fell, apparently through sheer weakness, and it was highly ludicrous to behold the discomfited looks of those who had bet most heavily upon him. He stood for 3 rounds more, but time was called in vain for the 44th, and the Haggerstone Pet was declared to be the conqueror. The Bruiser seemed to be in a horrible plight. For some time he remained motionless upon the ground, obstinately resisting all the efforts that were made to recover him, until one of his friends thrust a huge pinch of snuff up his nose, and then he was compelled to sneeze. He was now borne to the Green Lion in Wigginton and put to bed. A surgeon in Sir Rupert Harborough's pay volunteered his services to attend upon him, and although the bruiser had nothing more serious the matter with him than a few bruises and a couple of black eyes, the medical gentleman assured the multitudes who flocked to the inn that the poor fellow could not possibly be worse. A great deal of medicine was also purchased at the village apothecary's shop, but it was all quietly thrown away by the surgeon, and the bruiser was regaled in the privacy of his chamber with a good cut off a sirloin of beef and a bottle of port wine. Lord Dunstable, Mr. Chichester, Colonel Cholmondeley, and Sir Rupert Harborough divided equally amongst themselves the money won by this cross. They sacked £1,000 each, Egerton alone having lost 1,500 upon the fight. The 5 friends returned to town in his lordship's foreign hand, and dined that evening at Limmer's, where Egerton speedily drowned the recollection of his heavy losses in bumpers of champagne and claret. The party afterwards repaired to Crockford's, but just as they were ascending the steps, they beheld one of the waiters in altercation with a person of emaciated form, haggard countenance, and shabby attire, but who had evidently seen better, far better days, for his language was correct, and even beneath his rags there was an air of gentility which no tatters could conceal, no penury altogether subdue. "Come, Major, none of this nonsense. It won't do here," said the waiter, in an insolent tone. "Be off with you. There's gentlemen coming in." "I care not who hears me," cried the person thus addressed. "Mr. Crockford is within. I know he is, and I must see him." "No, he's not here, and he never comes now," returned the waiter. "If you do not make yourself scarce, I'll call a policeman. Pray walk in, my lord, walk in, gentlemen." These last words were addressed to Lord Dunstable, and his party, but instead of entering the club, they remained on the step to hear the issue of the dispute. "I think I know who this major is. I think it's someone we've seen before." "Call a policeman? Oh, do," said the major. "I wish you would, for I should at least have a roof over my head tonight, whereas I now stand the chance of wandering the streets. But you dare not give me in charge? No, you dare not. You know that I should expose all the infamy of this den before the magistrate tomorrow morning. However, in one word, will you deliver my message to Mr. Crockford?" "I tell you that he is not here," repeated the waiter insolently. "Did you give him my note?" asked the major, in an imploring tone. "Yes, and he said there was no answer," replied the menial, placing his thumbs in the armholes of his waistcoat. "No answer for me?" cried the miserable man in a voice of bitter despair. "No answer for me? And I lost so much in this house. Surely he could spare a guinea from the thousands which he has received of me. I only ask him for a guinea, and does he not condescend to answer me?" "Well, I tell you what it is," said the waiter, perceiving that not only Lord Dunstable's party lingered upon the steps, but there was also another listener, a gentleman in a military cloak, standing at a short distance. "If you will go away now, I will give you half a crown out of my own pocket, and I will undertake that Mr. Crockford shall send you a sovereign tomorrow." "God knows with what reluctance I accept this miserable trifle from you," exclaimed the unhappy man, tears rolling down his cheeks as he extended his hand for the pittance offered. At the same instant, Egerton, who was much moved by all he had just overheard, drew forth his purse with the intention of presenting 5 sovereigns to the poor major. But the waiter, perceiving his intention, hastened to drop the half-crown into the miserable wretch's palm with a view to get rid of him at once. For the domestic wisely argued to himself that every guinea which Egerton might give away would be so much lost to his master's bank upstairs. The half-crown piece had just touched the major's hand when the individual in the cloak sprang forward, seized it, threw it indignantly in the servant's face, and dragging the major away from the door, exclaimed, "No, never shall it be said that a soldier and an officer received alms from an insolent lackey. Mine be the duty of relieving your wants." And leading the major a few paces up the street, the stranger bade him enter a carriage that was waiting, and into which he immediately followed. The servant closed the door, received some whispered instructions from his master, and got up behind the vehicle, which immediately rolled away at a rapid pace. To return to Lord Dunstable and his party. The moment that the individual in the cloak sprang forward in the manner described, and the light of the hall lamp streamed full upon his countenance, both Harborough and Chichester uttered exclamations of surprise, and hastened precipitately into the club, followed by Dunstable, Egerton, and Cholmondeley. "What's the matter?" demanded Dunstable, when the baronet and Chichester were overtaken on the stairs. "And who's that person?" "The Prince of Montoni," replied Harborough, whose countenance was very pale. "Richard!" "Oh, I keep hoping he is going to be able to have his day of reckoning with Chichester and Harborough, since they're the ones who caused him so much trouble at the very, very, very beginning of this story. Come on. Yes, said Chichester hastily. We know him well, and as he is very particular in his notions, we did not wish him to see us coming here. But enough of that. Let us adorn to the hazard room. The conversation between the Major and the waiter, displaying as it did a fearful instance of the result of gaming, had made a deep impression upon Albert Egerton, and for some time he was thoughtful and serious. But Dunstable attacked him so adroitly with the artillery of flattery, the waiter offered him claret so frequently, the excitement of the play appeared so agreeable, and the fear of losing ground in the good opinion of his aristocratic acquaintances was so strong in his mind, that he seized the dice-box, staked his money, lost as usual, and was conducted home in a state of intoxication at about 3:30 in the morning. Ah! Oh, come on, Egerton. You gotta get out of there. In the meantime, the unfortunate Major Anderson, for such was his name, okay, he wasn't who I thought he was, had received substantial proofs of that goodness of heart which prompted the Prince of Montoni to espouse his cause against the brutal insolence of Crockford's waiter. Immediately after the carriage rolled away from the corner of St. James's Street, Richard drew forth his pocketbook and placed a banknote accompanied by his card in the Major's hand. By means of this temporary relief, sir, he said, you can place yourself in a somewhat more comfortable position than that in which I deeply regret to find you, and when you feel inclined to see me again, be good enough to write me a note to that effect so I may call upon you. For it would not be impertinently prying into your affairs. I should wish to learn the sad narrative of those reverses which have so reduced a gentleman of your rank and station. Oh, sir, whoever you are, exclaimed the Major, for it was too dark to permit him to read his benefactor's card. How can I ever sufficiently thank you for this noble, this generous conduct? But think not that your bounty will have been bestowed in vain. Think not that I would risk 1/6 of this sum, whatever be its amount, at the gaming table. Oh, who would ever play again that has seen such misery as I? No, sir, no, I would rather throw myself headlong from one of the bridges into the silent water of the Thames than enter the gambler's den. Then let me tell you frankly, said Markham, much moved by the touching sincerity of the ruined officer's tone and manner, let me tell you frankly that my object in wishing to see you again was to satisfy myself that you had in reality abjured the detestable vice which has beggared you, and that you are deserving of all I am prepared to do for your benefit. Tomorrow afternoon, sir, answered the Major, I will take the liberty of writing to you, for by that time I shall once more be the possessor of some humble lodging, and now with your permission I will alight here. Richard pulled the check string, and the carriage stopped in Oxford Street. The Major alighted, pressed our hero's hand fervently, and hurried away. When the carriage had disappeared, and the poor man's feelings were somewhat composed, he stopped beneath a lamp to learn the name of his benefactor. The Prince of Montoni, he exclaimed joyfully. Oh, then I am saved, I am saved. He will never let me want again. All London rings with the fame of his goodness. His whole time seems to be passed in benefiting his fellow creatures. Wherever poverty is known to exist, thither does he send his secret, unostentatious charity. But such good deeds cannot remain concealed. And I for one will proclaim to all who have spurned me in my bitter need that a stranger has saved me, and that stranger a great prince whose shoes they are not worthy to touch. Such were the words which the grateful man uttered aloud in the open street, but when he glanced at the bank-note and found himself suddenly possessed of £50, he burst into a flood of tears of the most heartfelt joy. And Richard returned home with the satisfaction of having done another charitable action. We say another, because charitable deeds with him were far more common than even promises on the part of many richer men. But Markham delighted in doing good. Often of an evening would he repair into London, and leaving his carriage at the corner of some street, wander about the immediate neighbourhood to succour the poor houseless wretches whom he might meet, and to discover new cases in which his bounty might be usefully bestowed. Without hesitation, without disgust, did he penetrate into the wretched abodes of want, go down even into the cellars, or climb up into the attics, where poverty was to be relieved and joy to be shed into the despairing heart. And when he returned home, after such expeditions as these, to his beloved wife and darling child, for he was now a father, the happy father of a lovely boy whom he had named Alberto, he found his reward in the approving smiles of the princess, even if he had not previously reaped an adequate recompense in the mere fact of doing so much good. I thought he might be a father by now, and I'm wondering if his sister, Catherine, has married her Italian beau, because they did reconnect. I want to know what all is going in there. And Ellen, I don't think anyone knows the identity of Ellen's husband at this point, but we'll see. All right. Indeed, there was not a happier house in the world than Markham Place, for not only was the felicity of Richard complete, save in respect to his anxiety concerning his long-lost brother Eugene, but that of his sister was also ensured. United to Mario Bazzano, Catherine and her husband resided at the mansion, beneath the same roof where Mr. Monroe and Ellen also continued to enjoy a home. But let us continue the thread of our narrative. True to his promise, Major Anderson wrote on the following day to acquaint our hero with his place of abode, and to renew the expression of his most fervent gratitude for the generous conduct he had experienced at the hands of the Prince of Montoni. In the evening, Richard proceeded to the humble but comfortable lodging which the Major now occupied in the neighborhood of the Tottenham Court Road. And from the lips of the individual whom his bounty had restored to comparative happiness did our hero learn the following terrible narrative of a gambler's life. Okay, that's the end of that chapter. We've caught up with Richard. I knew he had to show back up again. This whole thing is about him and Eliza Sidney. So he's doing good. They have a little baby. His sister married Mario Bazzano. They're living there too. Ellen and Mr. Monroe are still there. Richard's out doing good in the world because we all knew he would, right? That's just who he is. He still hasn't met back up with Eugene, but we're pretty sure we know who Eugene is. Now we're going to find out what brought Major Anderson into his current circumstances. All right, see you in the next one.